All right. Welcome back to class 6 of Natural Building to Code. In this class, we will cover designing your own home. We will review natural building design principles. We'll talk about conceptual spacing design, standard size of household fixtures, window design and layout, room layout, outdoor space, closet and storage, kids' room and play area, and we will also cover permaculture zones for the garden. All right, let's start with a review of natural building design principles. Some of this we already covered in previous classes, so this is just a review. First thing that we talked about was building for what you need now with the end in mind, which basically means you don't want to design a home that is too big, that will either cost too much money or will end up just staying mostly empty because you are planning to have 6 kids in the next 20 years. It might be better for you just to plan out each individual room so that you can kind of build with your budget and also not take up too much space, have more things to clean, and have a higher cost to build. We also want to make sure we're taking in consideration passive solar design, which basically means you are facing south, so that you can catch that lower winter sun coming in through the windows and heating up the home, either through your earthen floor, or your cob walls or your high solar gain walls systems. We also talk about using materials that are found in your area or nearby. So again, you want to kind of build for the materials that are readily available. For example, here in Northern California, we have lots of wood and lots of forest area. So we try to use wood framing, and then we are also close to rice fields, and we use rice straw for our infill. And then we have an abundance of clay in the area, and so we try to utilize the clay that comes from the foundation to help level out the walls. And then we are near a clay mine, so that we are able to use pure clay to do our plasters. We also want to consider a budget to finish your building, or you want to make sure that you are building in phases, which is basically kind of similar to build with for what you need now. And when you're building with a budget, you want to try to not build too much so that you run out of money, but you want to try to build it in a way that, let's say you have enough to build 300 square feet. So you start off with a 300 square foot. That could be a kitchen, living room, dining room kind of situation, with a little loft above. And then as you have more budget, more money, then you can start to expand that. And let's say you add a master bedroom with a bath, or you add a greenhouse that you can now expand into as additional space for the living, kitchen, dining area. Or you say you want to add bedrooms, you can start adding little pods of bedrooms around the home that are attached through the building. But it's important to have the end in mind so that way when you're designing, you can have those doors accessible to you without having to go into a wall, especially a straw bale wall, and have to knock it down or break it down or find a way to make an opening. So, all right, let's move on. Conceptual spacing design. So, first of all, let's talk a little bit about the book that we highly recommend using, especially if you're going to be building multiple buildings. So, if you're going to try to do natural building design for a living or consulting for a living, or you're going to be building a lot of natural buildings that you're either going to hold and rent or sell, you want to try to have this book. It's called the Pattern Language Book. It's written by Christopher Alexander, who's the main author, but there are several other architect authors that contribute to this book. And it's basically taking in consideration what makes a building feel comfortable, feel warm, feel homey, um, makes it practical for each person or family. And it goes as small as into a closet and as large as designing cities, towns, states, countries, governments. So it's a pretty awesome book. One of the things that the book talks about is the heart of the home. So in like pre-industrial age, the heart of the home, if you're living in the country, was basically your kitchen. where you would be prepping your food, you would be homesteading, and you would be taking care of your family. And then as the industrial age kicked in, cities started to span, and houses started to get built more in the inner cities. And people would have servants and would have cooks. Then the kitchen kind of went to the back of the home. It had its own separate porch for smoking for the cooks and the house tenants, or people who took care of the home. And the kitchen was no longer the heart of the home. What was the heart of the home was the living room, and that's where the lounge was. That's where the radio was if you're listening to radio before television. And then when television came, then it was a TV room, again with couches for reading, for listening, for entertaining, and that became the heart of the home. So if you walk into some of these California bungalows, or four squares that were built in late 1800s, early 1900s, the Victorian homes, you will see that the kitchen is in the back corner of the home, and the entry area opens up to a living room, dining room area, which is the area where most of the people were hanging out. The other concept that the book talks about is room flow. So it highly recommends not using hallways, but actually using rooms as in between, so that you can go in between rooms and access other rooms. So one concept for room flow is separating the rooms with different heights of ceilings or different heights of floors. So you can either step down into the living room or step up into the kitchen, or you have a lower ceiling in the kitchen and you have a higher ceiling in the great room. Um, so it kind of creates more differentials of space using ceiling heights and floor heights. The book also talks about using light on two sides. So ideally, if you have a room, it would have windows on opposite locations or on either side of, if you're in a corner. So you want to have light in two sides of the room coming in. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about some standard size kitchen fixtures. It's important to know these things because when you are designing, you have to take in consideration how much room you need for what. Don't want to just put a table in the middle of the room and then not have enough walking space to be able to get around someone that's sitting there. So you want to have some of these things in mind when you're designing. Tables are typically somewhere around 28 to 30 inches tall. Um, they can be 3 by 3 or 3 by 6 or 6 by 6. It just kind of depends on how many people are going to sit in your kitchen, in your dining room, excuse me, or in your kitchen if you're going to have a table in the kitchen. Chairs are around 18 inches to 23 inches tall, again, depending on the table. Ideally, you need 15 to 18 inches in width so that someone can sit comfortably. But also taking in consideration that when you turn around to stand up, you need additional room. So typically, we like to have somewhere around 24 inches around the chair itself. So a foot on each side, so you can kind of turn your knees and get up and get out. And you have some elbow room as well. Stove sizes can vary. So depending on the stove that you're getting, but typically they're around 36 inches tall. 30-inch wide is usually the standard width. The depth is about 27 inches deep, but you can get bigger ones, especially if you're going to have multiple burners. You're going to have a griddle section, or if you're going to have two ovens. So it just kind of really depends on your stove. Fridges can be 29 inches to 39 inches wide. The height depending on the fridge. So it's important to know which fridge you're getting so that when you're designing the cabinets, the upper cabinets can fit inside. So make sure you have that information before you start doing your cabinet design. Countertops are 36 inches tall. That's usually to the finished countertop. They're typically about 24 to 26 inches deep. Kitchen sinks can range between 30 to 36 inches wide, and the depth kind of vary between 24 to 21 inches, just depending on the sink. All right, moving on, designing the kitchen. So again, the pattern language recommends open space layout, like a farm kitchen that's ideally connected to other spaces, so that you have an open space between the kitchen, the living room, the dining room. Ideally, you'll either have an island or some kind of table in the kitchen. You can have breakfast nooks, so a little separate section where you can have breakfast with your family without having to sit at a big table and have a formal breakfast. You want to have access to garden space through the kitchen so that you can go out and get your herbs, you can get your salads, you can cucumbers, anything that you need for quick cooking. You want to be in walking distance to the fridge, to the stove, to the sink. So you want to try to make your design so you're not having to walk too far away from each of the locations. And then with that walking space, ideally you want to be able to have 3 to 4 feet minimum so that two people can walk side by side next to each other or across from each other or past each other so that they're not bumping into furniture or bumping into each other. So you want to have 3 to 4 feet minimum. If you're going to have a dining room table in the kitchen, you want to make sure you have that spacing, so that 4 foot minimum spacing all the way around, so that when chairs are sticking out, you're not having to squeeze in between a chair and the cabinets or chair and the stove and chair and the fixtures, refrigerator. Okay. Designing the living room. So again, if this concept is for open floor layout. So again, your means that your kitchen, living room, and dining room are all kind of open to each other. So you have access to the kitchen, you have access to the entry room, you have access to the bedrooms. Ideally, there would be a fireplace or a TV area or a bar. You would have a view or a porch or all of the above and access to the garden. And ideally, you would have seating for all the people in the home plus guests. So you want to make sure you have plenty of seating. Designing the bedrooms. So location of the bedrooms is really important. Ideally, they would either be on the east if you're going to kind of get up early and be part of a morning routine. West if you're going to kind of go to bed early and you want to be part of this sunset routine. Or let's say north if you want to be an area where you're not getting any light in the morning or in the evening. It's just nice and dark and it's actually cool because you maybe get hot at night. So north would be good. Typically, we don't try to put bedrooms on the south just because we want to utilize the south for passive solar design so that we can capture as much heat into each of the rooms, the living room, dining room, kitchen area. But obviously, if you are going to have a room that faces south, you want to try to utilize that passive solar design. So you don't want to put your bed somewhere where it's taking up the majority of the floor space, which is catching that heat and storing it for your evening. You want to think about the size of the room. So it's important for you to consider what kind of bed that you're going to be having in this room. So if you're going to have a bed, it's good to know like what's a king bed. Well, that's about 8 inches long and 76 inches wide. Or if you're going to have a queen bed, that's 80 inches by 60 inches wide. Or a full bed, 75 long by 53 wide. Or let's say you're going to have a twin, it's 75 long and 38 inches wide. Or you're going to have multiple beds in that room. So then you can kind of arrange it accordingly. Mostly, it's important to know the size of your bed so that you have an idea of how much room you have around the bed. You don't want to be having the bed take 90% of the room and only having about a foot and a half around the bed to be able to make the bed or to be able to walk to get yourself ready. So you want to have an appropriate sized bed for the appropriate sized room. Who is the bedroom for? So it's important to consider if this is going to be for your family, if it's going to be for guests, or if it's going to be used as multiple aspects of it, like an entertaining room, yoga room, office, but it has a bed in it, so you want to be able to use it if you have guests. So think about who's going to be using the room. Ideally, you would have access to a porch or access to a garden. You also want to consider where the bedroom's going to be in the location of the home. So if you're going to have, like, let's say a guest bedroom, and you want to have their own entrance, so they're not, if they're coming home late in the evening, they're not bothering the family, or they can have their own space to kind of leave and come as they please. Or if it's going to be utilized for your kids or family members, then you want, depending on where you are in the home, how close do you want that room to be to your room? All right, bathroom layout. Who is the bathroom for? Is this going to be for a guest? Is it going to be a half bath, a full bath? So take in consideration who the bathroom is for, where the location of the bathroom is going to be in relevance to the house. In regards to the kitchen, living room, bedrooms, how far away is that bathroom? You don't want to have a bathroom too close to the living area because then the guests who will be using it could feel a little subconscious about it and about how loud they're being and who can hear and who can't hear. It's important to know the toilet size because if you don't know the toilet size, you can make the bathroom too small or you can make it too big. So ideally, most standard size toilets would be somewhere around 18 inches tall. That's to the top of the tank, or sorry, top of the seat. 18 inches wide. That's the width of the tank. And then ideally, you'll have about 12 inches all around the toilet so that you can access the toilet paper or towels or anything. Tub sizes can vary, but you can get a 5 foot to 6 foot long tub, and typically tubs are around 3 foot wide. You can get bigger ones, so just make sure if you are going to get a bigger one that you consider which one you're getting while you're doing your design. Showers, stalls are a minimum of 3 foot by 3 foot. Ideally, they're a 4 foot by 4 foot, but they can also, again, be bigger. Half bathrooms. Typically, the smallest bathroom you want for a half bath is a 3 foot by 6 foot. Ideally, they would be more like 4 foot by 8 foot. Full bathrooms, a minimum of 5 feet by 7 feet. Ideally, 6 foot by 8 feet would be best. Vanity depths can be 20 to 21 inches, and then the width can vary between 24 to 72 or bigger. Okay, talking about the master bedroom now. Again, location of the master bedroom is important. If it's going to be something that you're going to want to be using in the morning, then you want to face east. If it's something that's going to be more used in the evening to say watch the sunset together as a couple, or if you want it to be more cool and less light, either in the morning or in the evening, you maybe want to put it somewhere on the north. Ideally, you'll have a view, or you'll have a fireplace, or you'll have access to TV if you wanted to use it to watch movies before you go to bed or anything like that. You want to make sure you have a seating area for you and your partner. You want to have access to porch or garden. You want to have a seating area to talk or to put your stuff, and ideally, if you are going to be using the bedroom in the morning, let's say for yoga or meditation, or in evening for yoga and meditation, you want to try to have enough space to be able to do that together as a partner or individually if the other person's still sleeping or going to bed. Master bath and master closet. So location of the master bath and the master closet in the bedroom, it's important. You don't want to utilize a lot of the window spacing for a closet. You want to try to utilize that for the majority of the room and the bathroom. Ideally, you would have a shower stall, a bathtub with a view. You would have a sink for each partner or each person that's utilizing the master bedroom. You would ideally have a toilet room so that you can have privacy when you're using the toilet with its own separate little sink inside, or a sink that's near outside the toilet closet. Ideally, you would have a closet for each partner. And again, the closet size depends on the partner and how much clothes they have and what they're using it for. Ideally, you would have access to outdoor hot tub or a garden space or outdoor shower so that you don't have to go around the house to be able to utilize those spaces. You can just leave right outside of your master bedroom. Okay, kids' room. So depending on how old your kids are, will depend on where you put their bedrooms. The younger they are, the closer to the parents. And then obviously the older they are, the further away from the parents. Play area in the room or in between the rooms is important to consider. If it's a big room, you want to have sleeping nooks so that each kid can have its own private little nook to sleep in. You want to have space for desks for homework. You want to think about access to outdoor play area through the bedrooms. And you ideally want to be close enough to the kitchen and the living room so that they can feel part of the family if they are playing in their room or doing homework in their room. Okay, kids area in the home. So ideally, an area for kids to be with their toys, doing their homework that's close to the kitchen or the living room so that they can still, again, feel to be part of the family while it's cooking time or parents are working in the home. Ideally, you want to have a TV room or a game room so that if you are entertaining and you're having people hang out in the living room, you don't have kids also watching a movie at the same time. Ideally, they'll have their own TV room or game room so they can kind of be away from um, that communal space. Area for friends to come and play a sleepover. So ideally, the rooms are big enough that they can have guests. They can have areas to play in, again, a playroom area or a TV room, a place where toys, games, and stuff can stay out. So a lot of times if the kids are playing and it's time to go to bed, they want to leave their toys out so that they can finish playing in the morning. They don't want to pick it up. So you want to be able to have availability of space so that it's not in your way when you're trying to clean up in the evening, but yet they can still have their toys out so they can play. Um, and that could be in the game room, it could be in the TV room, it could be in the family corner room, but it just really depends on your layout. A place where kids can do homework near the kitchen and the living room. So you want to try to think about having like little tables, especially if they're young, or if you're going to do homework at the island or on the kitchen table. You want to be able to help them with homework if you're cooking, cleaning, or getting things ready for the family. Guest room or spaces. So location of the guest room in the house is really important. So if you're, again, like we talked about this earlier, but if you're going to have a guest and you want to have them have their own access to the outdoor, to the garage, to the walk paths or the garden, it's important to think about the location. Having a guest bathroom as part of the room or near the room is important. Guest area as part of the house or a separate dwelling on the property. So you may want to consider if, let's say, you're going to have long-term guests stay with you, maybe they should have their own little cottage where they can have a little kitchenette to make their tea, their coffee in the morning, have their own seating area, their own couch, chair, access to the garden and a bedroom, just basically a small little cabin where they can kind of stay and hang out until, the whole family either wakes up or everyone's ready or they're invited into the home. Who will be using the guest rooms. So again, if you're going to have like long-term family members stay, basically this means staying more than 30 days. If you're going to have short-term guests staying, or if it's going to be like a rental room or an Airbnb room, things to consider. Do you want to have a separate entrance, like, a separate entrance to each of the dwellings or the home or the rooms? So, are they going to have access to garden space? Does it need to have its own little kitchenette or its own kitchen? Things to consider for the guest room. Hallways and walkways. So as we spoke about earlier, you want to minimize your hallways and walkways because it kind of takes up space and creates a dead energy zone. And so minimizing hallways and walkways is important. Ideally, you want to use through rooms if possible. Again, using rooms to go in between. So if you have a living room that's connected to the entry room, that's connected to the dining room, that's connected to the kitchen, those are all through rooms. If you're going to have access to bedrooms, let's say, you have that's connected to the entry room to get to the bedrooms, or it's connected to the living room or the dining room or the kitchen to get to the bedrooms. Bringing light to the walkways. So ideally, if you are going to have some kind of walkway, having natural light coming in, let's say from one end of the walkway to the other end. So light on two sides. Ideally, if you are going to have walkways or hallways, you want to make sure you have enough space for two people to walk across each other. So it's either 3 feet to 5 feet walking space for traffic. You can use indoor or outdoor walkways. So you can use breezeways or you can use like greenhouse hallways to be able to get for access one room to the other room. Flow between rooms, which separation of space with levels and ceilings and heights, like we talked about earlier. Okay, now closets and utility rooms. So ideally, every room should have a closet, and it should be a minimum of 2 feet deep by 4 feet wide. Ideally, you have a utility room that basically houses your hot water or your HVA system or your electrical box or all of the above. You want to try to have an entry room closet, so that way you have an area to put your coats, your wet clothing, your jackets, your shoes. Ideally, you would have a pantry in the kitchen that would be big enough to store things that you need for your family. Ideally, you would have a linen closet near the bedrooms. Ideally, you would have a closet in the bathrooms. You would have a closet in the living room, for towels and blankets and pillows. And ideally, you would have a washer dryer closet or a room so that you can be able to utilize that room just for laundry, which I think is super important. Office space or art studio for each member of the family that is either working from home or utilizes home offices as a way to spark their creativity or to create or to be inspired. So you would either have his or her office art studio that's either could be shared or something that you can share with your partner. Ideally, you want to think about the location of that art studio or office in relevance to the home. You don't want it to be near the kids' room so that you're making a bunch of noise when they're trying to go to bed, or they're making a bunch of noise while you're trying to work. Ideally, you would have a view or access to garden space for inspiration. It would be a quiet space, so it would be far away from lots of noise, the kitchen, living room, dining room area. If you're going to have visitors, you would have access to parking. Ideally, you would have a walking area outside to get to vehicles or to get to entryways. And ideally, you would have it would have its own bathroom and sink nearby to be able to use for guests or for yourself, so you don't have to walk across the whole house to get to a bathroom. Mudroom and entry room. Ideally, every home would have one of these. You can have it as a porch that's open to air, or you can have it enclosed. And you want to try to have it location near the main door. Location of the entry room and the mudroom is important in terms of where you're going to be coming in inside the home. So orientating which is the pathways if you're coming in from the garage, if you're coming in from the outside world, how are you getting into your entry room? What's the closest way? You don't want to be walking around the whole house to get to the entry room with a bunch of groceries. You want to have closets in the mudroom so you can put things away. You want to have storage, for winter stuff. Ideally, it would either be tile or stone or cement or something that's easy to clean. So when you're coming in with dirty boots, a place to sit and put on your shoes, a place to hang your coats in case you don't want to put a wet coat inside of a closet with a door closed that can mold. You want to have access to airflow, and then you want to have ideally space for your shoes. Okay, window and door design. So where there are a lot of options for styles of windows and doors. So it's important to kind of take in consideration your budget. You can go really super high end with windows and doors, or you can go super low end. So you want to kind of take a look at that as you're starting to kind of budget your home once you have your design and your layout. Find one that you like and that's within your budget and stick with it throughout the home so that the windows and doors match. Ideally, you want to think about light on two sides. So when you're designing each room, you can use, like transit light through doors to get into like bringing light into like hallways or walkways or light into other rooms. You want to think about the height of the windows. So like if you're going to have a seating window, you want to make sure that it's not higher than 18 inches off the ground. If you're going to have countertop windows, you want to make sure they're no less than 40 inches off the ground. Second story windows, you want to make sure that they, depending on your code, but in our code, they need to be 24 inches off the ground. If you're going to have doors, you want to think about which way the door is going to swing. Is it going to swing into the bathroom or out? Ideally, you want to think about door swings for each of the rooms. If you're going to have sliders or French doors, how are they going to open? And you want to think about door heights. Do you want to match your door height to your window height, or do you care that maybe your windows are higher than your door? You got to kind of think about that. Outdoor spaces. So very important. You want to make sure that the outdoor becomes part of your extension of your living area, which is your kitchen, living room, and dining room. So you want to have access to outdoor dining, outdoor patio or kitchen area, so that you can kind of cook outside during different times of the year. Ideally, it would have created space with pavers or natural stones or some kind of borders, hanging lights, ground lights, anything that kind of differentiates the spaces, the kitchen, the living room, the outdoor dining room, so that you can kind of see that there's a outdoor living space. If you're going to do exterior cooking, dining, you want to make sure you have seating area. Outside fireplaces or fire pits, it's another way to add additional comfort. Gardens around the outdoor living spaces, so that if you are cooking outside, you can go out and grab whatever you need. If you have a greenhouse or for winter use, it's really nice. So in other words, in winter, the outdoor living area could be enclosed with greenhouse windows or lights, so that you can have nice and warm space to use in the evening or during the day. All right, porches and courtyards. Okay, location of porches is important. You want to make sure it's near a kitchen or dining room area or living room area, or by master bedroom. So think about where your location for your porches would be if you want to use those as exterior living space. Size of the porches depends on the use, so you don't need a huge porch if you're just going to go outside and use it as a smoking porch. You want to think about natural wood versus Trex, which Trex is just composite wood. It's not real. It's like plastic or fiberglass. One of them would last longer than the other, obviously, and you would have less maintenance, but it's important to kind of consider what's important to you and your values. Maintaining your porches. So again, if you're using natural wood, you're going to want to make sure you're oiling every year or every couple years. That ideally you're not painting them. So because if you paint them, then it doesn't allow the wood to breathe, unless you're using mineral paints, of course. If you're using Trex, you'll know that lasts a pretty long time, but you're also still having to use wood for some of the structural components. So you want to make sure that's being maintained. If you're going to have a courtyard entrance, kind of consider how that entrance is going to look in terms of your design. Courtyard at the center of the home. It's another beautiful design concept. Courtyard as outdoor living space. So if you're going to have a courtyard and it's going to be kind of surrounded either on 4 sides or on 2 sides or 3 sides, and it's going to be an extension of your living space. And then there's a courtyard as part of the office space or part of the master bedroom. So kind of considering that as well. Okay, permaculture garden as part of the home. So if you haven't taken a permaculture class, that's okay. Don't worry about it. There's lots of information online. But basically, permaculture zones are divided into areas where productivity, depending on how you use it. So if you have, let's say, zone 0 would be your everyday use. That would be your herbs, your medicine herbs, your cooking herbs. Zone 2 would be more of an extension of your garden area. You might also have like chickens in that area. If your zone 2 would also might have like a pigs or a bigger livestock, and they would have fruit trees and berry bushes and things like that. And then you're expanding zoning out into more of not touched forestry area or field area where you can use it for grazing for animals or for growing different kinds of trees that you would use for your buildings or for fruits. Okay. Now, let's cover a little bit about different aspects. If you don't have a huge yard, if you don't have a huge place, you want to try to utilize the zones. Your zones might look a little bit different. They might be closer. You may have less zones, but you do want to make sure that you're considering the things that we talked about, such as having herbs, first aid plants near the kitchen. You want to make sure you have veggie gardens near the kitchen, fruit bushes and shrubs near the kitchen, fruit trees near the home, beautiful flowers around the walkways and the courtyards and the entrances, and making a place for the bees, the chickens, and the birds. Okay, so let's finish up here. Let's conclude this class. So we talked a little bit about the permaculture designs. We talked about different aspects of building. So you want to consider designing your home for what you need now with the end in mind. You want to make sure natural light is coming from at least two sides of every room. You want to have open floor plan for the kitchen, the living room, and the dining room. You want to minimize your hallways and use through rooms instead. You want to consider the kids' needs into the design. You want to get the pattern language book before you design your home, especially if you're going to do multiple homes. Don't forget the mud room, closets in every room, utility room, pantry, washer and dryer room or closet. Very important. Make extra closets for storage for off-season, holiday, and other household items. You want to consider outdoor as an extension of the kitchen, dining room, and the living room. And you want to think about permaculture gardens around the home as part of the design. All right, so that will conclude our class. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach us at naturallivingschool.com, or you can visit our website and see if there's additional classes that you want to catch up on. Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, and thanks for being part of this class.